One. What is going on, everybody? Welcome into the Blitz podcast. Today we are talking about our 12th ranked 12s, the Seattle Seahawks. Fun team to talk about for sure. They were 9-8 last season, make the playoffs as a seventh seed after trading away the guy who's been their franchise quarterback for a very long time in Russell Wilson. And they bring in Geno Smith. He comes in as immediately plays like one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, quite frankly. Last season was definitely playing on a much higher level than Russell Wilson was in Denver. I've got Mitchell with me wearing his Marshawn Lynch jersey. Very excited here. He's, me personally, I would never buy a jersey from another team. I don't know. Please let us know in the comments what your opinions are on that. Like, even if it's your favorite player, but he plays for another team, would you buy their jersey? While you're doing that, you might as well like, subscribe, all the other stuff. But now I'm going to ask Mitchell how he's doing today.
Wow, just what a flow to plug in the YouTube page, like, subscribe, comment. This guy's becoming a natural host. But you're growing every day and every time you do this. There's been so many fumbles along the way, but you're finally picking up the flow. I'm just glad to be here.
Thing in there, but that's okay.
I mean, it's a learning experience. Everybody has them here and there. You're figuring it out. But yeah, former Seahawk, Marshawn Lynch. I like their jerseys when they switched to Nike, and plus Marshawn Lynch was the big thing. It was right after the Beastquake. I bought it before their Super Bowl win. It was just cool. It made me look like a bandwagon every time I wore it, though, even though I was a Chargers fan. But it was Marshawn Lynch, so you can't complain that much. He just took the league by storm and was too lovable of a guy to not get it.
Yeah, you were, I don't know how old you were, but in that like Seahawks era, I was like in late elementary school, early middle school, and like if you were getting into sports, you were going to be a Seahawks fan. Like that was the team that, like, it was either, obviously being from Maryland, it was either the Ravens, or like if you were going outside of the state, you were going to be a Seahawks fan because they were like the most poppin' team at the time. They had these crazy jerseys that they just unveiled, and conveniently enough, like the other team that comes to mind of like teams that everybody flocked to is Oregon, who had like the same kind of jersey concept, and they're both in the
Northwest.
Yeah. So just kind of weird. Like, and I feel like that's kind of like carried Seattle's fan base, was that era and all those kids that were like 8, 9, 10, up to your like what you were like 14, 15 then, something like that.
Yeah, I was a freshman.
That like became football fans. And pick the Seahawks. Like that's what's carried their fan base, because it's not like Seattle's a super big market or anything. But anyway, let's talk about their current team, and we will start with the quarterback position, where, like we said, Geno Smith is the starter here. I mean, if we remember back to training camp and preseason last year, it kind of felt like Drew Lock was going to be the starter here. Like, he was younger, he had been a backup, he had been a starter like back and forth in Denver. And Geno Smith had been a backup here in Seattle for a very long time. Didn't pan out. I mean, he was a 2013 draft pick. It'd been almost 10 years since he got drafted last season. And you get Drew Lock, and it's like, all right, well, he was the return that we got for Russell Wilson. Let's just roll with him, see if this works. If not, we're picking in the top 4 or 5. We'll get a quarterback next year. Instead, they roll with Geno Smith, and I think that is a testament to Pete Carroll and how he's like, you know what, if you play well, you're going to play, regardless of what the front office thinks, regardless of what the investment was in you, you're going to play. And Geno Smith comes in and balls out. This was, like I said, played like a top 10 quarterback last year, ultimately was the right decision, and because of how bad Russell Wilson was in Denver, they still got that top 5 pick that they wanted. So very, very fun conversation, because on the flip side, we've never seen this level of play from Geno Smith. Even when he came into the league, he's had some multiple stops in multiple places. We've never seen Geno Smith play as well as he did last season, and it really did kind of tail off towards the end. I don't want to turn this into a Geno hate thing, because I'm really surprised and I'm very impressed with how he played. But as good as he was in the first half of last season, it did tail off towards the end, so there's a little bit of skepticism as to, could he carry that second half of the season into this year? And is that more like what Geno is, or is he more of the guy that we saw in the first half? What do you think?
Yeah, you sum it up pretty perfectly. The verdict's still out, and we're riding the fence perfectly on him, because we have him ranked 15th, middle of the pack. He's coming off a year with 4,200 yards and 30 touchdowns, and just an absurd amount of weapons. So if he can't get it done, then he'll never get it done again. Last year was a complete shock. I'll read off his grades really quick, starting from his rookie year. 60.7, 57.1, 60.3, 65, 70.9, 2018 with the Chargers, 20.6, 62.2, 73.9 when he was filling in for Russ, and then 79.8. So I think he somewhat adjusted to like Pete Carroll's setup when he got that playing time when Russ was out, and that helped him a lot. And they just have the weapons to make him work. But again, it's the first full season we've actually seen him put together and look like a competent starting quarterback. So I think we're hedging our bet just enough with our ranking on him, but I think he should at worst probably be up mid to upper 3,000 yards, probably mid-20s touchdowns as a floor, just because we'll get to the playmakers on the next slide, but there's no reason why he should be under that. And based on how Pete Carroll makes it sound, he makes it seem like Drew Lock could be a starter on any other team in the NFL. He just hypes up his guys so much that if Geno is the guy and he reverts back to what he was in like the Jets days, then I don't think Pete Carroll would hesitate to put in Drew Lock. But hopefully Geno does not revert back to that. He just keeps up what we saw last year that earned him comeback player of the year.
Yeah, and like you said, he was absolutely phenomenal. He finishes tied for 7th in yards. He finishes 9th in PFF grade for this past season. He also was tied for 2nd in big-time throws and 3rd in big-time throw percentage. Shout out to Bootleg Football for this stat I heard. I can't remember if it was 15 yards or 20 yards or more down the field. When you're throwing that far down the field, usually you're hoping for your quarterback to have about a 30, 33, somewhere around there completion percentage on those throws, because those are usually more difficult throws. Last season, Geno Smith completed 51% of his passes that are considered deep passes. So when they were throwing deep, they completed it more times than not, which is almost like insane to think that like if you see a quarterback like cock back and throw it, and that he's got a higher chance of it being completed than being incomplete, that's insane. Like if you just like think about that in the context of I'm watching a game and that's how you think about it, that's very rare to see. So I think 15 is fine, and I think that's us hedging a little bit, because if he goes up, like I don't know, like what is his ceiling this year?
Probably like 10. Because he's consistent and he's got good weapons, but nobody's going to want to push him up too far just because he is in his 30s and we're just now seeing this from him. It's a little different. I don't think there's anything wrong with us like fence riding here and being right down the middle on him and not jumping to conclusions or writing him off, because Lord knows we don't want to write him off.
God damn it. You fucking lined yourself up for that. Yeah. I'd agree. I think he doesn't. That 10 spot is so weird because there's so many questions about like the guys from like 10 to 15. Obviously, you can't see two of them quite yet, but Geno, Stafford, Kyler Murray, Kirk Cousins, like you're not certain what you're going to get from any of those guys. I think Kyler Murray like would be my pick to be at 10, but he's obviously got the injury thing. We don't know how many games of Kyler Murray there's going to be this upcoming season, and that is the big problem and why we have them ranked at 12. If we know that we're getting a fully healthy Kyler Murray, I think he does put himself in that top 10, but he's not, and this is not a Cardinals episode. This is about Geno Smith now. The floor here is a very interesting conversation, because Geno Smith, to the point of last season, was a career backup, which, you know, mathematically would have you as 32 or really lower. I don't know if with these weapons and with this roster around him that he can go that low, but I definitely think that there's a world where that big time throw regression comes back, and he's completing maybe 25% of those, which is obviously not what you're hoping for. That's even less than what like league average or what you would aspire to be at a third. If he's completing maybe 20 or 25% of those, and this offense really takes a step back, you know, one of the Seattle running backs is going to get hurt, because that's just what happens when you put the uniform on. I don't know. I think somewhere in the early 20s could be like the worst case scenario, but I still think that if that happens, I still think Seattle's like a competitive team. Like we talked about this roster. It's so talented. We do have two groups that aren't ranking as highly. We'll talk about those in a little bit. But the other two groups, really highly.
Super high.
And we'll get into that group right now, or one of those two groups right now. And that is the playmakers here. I mean, what else can we say? This was a top group last season. And they continue to add to it. They spend one of their 2 first-round picks, number 21 or 20 overall on Jackson Smith
20.
and Jigba. 20, yep. On Jackson Smith and Jigba, was the first receiver off the board, was a lot of people's wide receiver 1, was a slot-only type of wide receiver. I remember we did a mock draft episode. You had him going at 9 to Chicago. You were really big or really high on Jackson Smith and Jigba at that time. They get him at 20 to go perfectly right here with 2 really nice perimeter options in DK Metcalf, who I think is one of the, I mean, not really a hot take here, but is definitely one of the best young receivers in the NFL. Can do not so many things for you, but is so good at the few things that he does that it just, also, he's a get off the bus, like, oh shit. Like,
this guy's going to run me the fuck over.
And then on the complete other end of that is Tyler Lockett, who falls down every time he catches the ball now, which is fine because he catches the ball a lot and he's able to get a lot of yards out of those, but he's not giving you a whole lot after the catch at this point in his career, but still a very productive receiver, still has been one of the most underrated receivers, still is one of the most underrated receivers in the NFL, especially when, you know, like those days where it was Russ. And like, I remember always the fantasy conversation around Tyler Lockett was, you just don't want to be the guy that's playing Tyler Lockett the one week that Russell Wilson decides that this is Tyler Lockett's week. Like, he was on those weeks was one of the most deadly players. It felt like there was like once a year where he'd get like 50 and he'd be like top 10 fantasy scoring ever. Like, he's definitely got, like, in the top 50 fantasy performances ever, he's definitely got at least 2 or 3 of those. And I know he's got one in the top 10 because I that night against Arizona where DK hawked down Budda Baker and Tyler Lockett had like 50 points on Sunday Night Football. I'll never forget that. I wasn't playing him that day, and I don't think I had him either, but I just remember, like, the group chat just, like, blowing up, like, oh, my God, he's got, like, oh, my God, he's got 3 now.
And I guarantee he was on somebody's bench. Nobody was playing him at that point.
And then at tight ends, you got Noah Fant here, who I think, honestly, is just going to be underutilized here. I mean, we talked about those 3 receivers that are fantastic. We're going to talk about the running backs in a second. I think Noah Fant could be like a Darren Waller light type of player a little bit. Doesn't run block as well.
Very light.
Very, very light. But if you put him in that Vegas situation where he was the wide receiver 1 effectively for them, I think Noah Fant could put up numbers, way more numbers than he's putting up here in Seattle.
He has no space to do it though here.
He has no space. Like, he better convert. He better score touchdowns, especially for fantasy purposes. Noah Fant better score a touchdown if you're starting him. Then we get to the running backs, which is the most frustrating backfield, at least right now, in my opinion. I think Philadelphia definitely will have a conversation because we don't know if any of those guys are good. And it's just like, well, if one guy gets hurt, the other guy's great. But even then, there's 2 or 3 guys behind him. But here in Seattle, it's really just going to be these 2. Both of them got dinged up on the same day. On the same, the reports came back of Kenny Walker just did this and Zach Charbonnet just did this.
I mean, you were right. They put on the jersey, so they put themselves at risk just by doing that.
Yeah, I mean, the jersey comes with a cast. It comes with crutches. But Kenny Walker last year was phenomenal in his rookie season. Rashad Penny, there's the bit, gets hurt in week 5 or 6. I was like, I had Rashad Penny. I was like,
makes sense.
This is it. I was waiting for this. It happened. He had a 28-point game. Boom, snaps his leg in half the very next week. And then it's Kenny Walker time, and was the waiver wire addition of the year for anybody that got him. And as a dynasty owner of Kenny Walker, I was like, well, this is awesome. I've got the dynasty RB 2 or 3. And then they draft the running back in the second round again after hitting on one the year before, which was extremely frustrating for a lot of people. And
they had to make room for the cast.
Yeah.
They knew what would happen.
And they're going to run Kenny Walker on outside zone stuff. And I think that they're going to try and do that a little bit more here. They're going to run Zach Charbonnet a little bit more in between the tackles, running that duo and stuff like that they tried to run with Kenny Walker last year, but he wasn't as effective with it just because that's not the kind of runner that he is. I've went in depth about every single one of these players now. So if you want to say something,
Not
since I've
McIntosh.
got you here. Oh yeah, that was the. I don't want to
McIntosh
do
would
it.
be
You
the
can
guy to
handle him.
get third down work, I feel like,
Yeah,
just
yeah,
because
you
he's
can
a good
handle him.
receiving back. But just going back to like Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, I did the fantasy slide for this, and since 2018, Tyler Lockett hadn't been below 200 points once in fantasy. I mean, just looking at his PFF grades, that was his fourth year in the league. Before that, he was high 60s and 76 his rookie year. He is the face of consistency. You're never going to get the upper echelon talent for a full season. You'll get it in spurts, like in the rush years. He would randomly have these games where he just went insane. But he will produce year in and year out, and you know what you're going to get from him. And then seems like DK's in the same path right now. I mean, after that rookie year where it was kind of just boom bust touchdowns, he still got like 180 fantasy points. He's been over 200 every year with him. And then you wedge in Jackson Smith and Jigba in the middle of that just to add an element of quick game, short passes, and even deeper slot routes. I mean, the way we talked about Geno Smith, his floor is only the low 20s because of these three. And frankly, if he completely falls off the face of the earth, these three should be able to pick him up as long as they're healthy. But they aren't running back, so that shouldn't be an issue with injuries. I do kind of worry about Kenny Walker's like dynasty ranking just because Charbonnet is great up the middle and he might be the goal line guy and is a little more useful at receiving. Granted, neither of them are great receiving backs. That's probably more McIntosh's alleyway. And it just remains to be seen who's going to be the guy to get all the points, or is it just going to be evenly spread like it has been between Lockett and DK so far? Either way, there's no real weak spot. I mean, Fant could be said to be a weak spot, but tight end's a weak position anyway. And if he's middle of the pack, that's serviceable. And then Will Dissly coming off the bench is a good red zone target for them.
Yeah, I mean, and they've also got Colby Parkinson here, which I watched like a 2 or 3 minute video on the other day of this guy that like absolutely loves Colby Parkinson. That like somebody needs to trade like a late day 2 pick for Colby Parkinson. It's like, you know what, you got me convinced. But I honestly think like the Charbonnet Kenny Walker thing is going to be weird, and the worst part about it is I think Kenny McIntosh makes it like 10 times worse, is because neither of these guys can catch PPR passes. Value. That's what's valuable in PPR formats, which is what everybody's doing now and running as standard. And Kenny McIntosh, who's going to be the third guy on this depth chart, that's what he does. And then he's going to be on the field for third down stuff. And then these two are going to be splitting first and second down work, and we're just going to get like every set of downs. It's going to be one guy, then the next guy, then the next guy, and nobody's happy. Like I am staying away from the Seattle backfield. Unfortunately, I had Kenny Walker in Dynasty in in the Dynasty Chicken League. I'd love to get rid of him, but nobody's going to give me fair value now. So that's what it is. I already drafted Charbonnet. I literally just said I'm staying away from him, and I had both of them at one point in time. But I did trade Charbonnet to Blitzpod legend Kane Schwartz. But yeah. This is our highest ranked playmaking group so far. It's going to be, honestly, I think what carries this group or what carries this team is just the fact that they've got, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weapons that like teams would be trying to acquire if they became available. Goddamn D. Eskridge, also here.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about him.
Also here, I believe was a
deep down the depth chart
2 or 3 years ago. Struggled with some injuries, but he's also on this depth chart as well. I don't actually know if he's on this depth chart.
He wasn't on the R lads when I was filling it out. So he's more like depth chart utility stuff at this point, I think.
But maybe you get something out of him. Maybe they end up maybe one of these guys misses some time, he comes in, and then they could trade him for a pick at the deadline. I don't know. All right, moving on to the offensive line here, where things get a little bit more quiet. This is a group that ranks 21st. The talk of the town last year in Seattle was this pair of starting tackles that were rookies. Very rarely do you see even one starting rookie tackle, because teams like to bring those guys along, and they've got 2 of them. Charles Cross was the number 9 overall pick in last year's draft, and then Abraham Lucas, I believe, was a second-round pick, one of their 2 second-round picks, because they had one from Denver. They both played fine. Like, I think that the media kind of overhyped them as far as how good they were, because they were 2 starting rookie tackles, but they were not like Rashawn Slater or Tristan Wirfs or those guys when they came in and they were starting and they were like fantastic all pro level players as rookie tackles. And I think that kind of got lost. So they're going to be. You're hoping for some progression from them. Obviously, as in guys in year 2, tackles in year 2, you hope you see a step from them. The interior, look, this isn't super exciting. Like Damian Lewis is probably like the best offensive lineman here, and a lot of people don't even know who that is. Like I was like,
it was the highest graded one.
Yeah, and like it was just kind of weird because like I think he was a 3rd or 4th round pick in his draft, and he just kind of developed quietly here in Seattle. You got Evan Brown coming over from Detroit. Was kind of a liability for them last year at guard, so maybe he turns it around at center. I don't really know. And then you got Phil Haynes here, who battled with Gabe Jackson for the right guard spot last year. Gabe Jackson was obviously getting paid a lot more, so to see Phil Haynes, hold his own and then eventually take this starting job as Gabe Jackson gets let out the door, that's good. But what do you have to say about this offensive line group?
Yeah, like you mentioned, Damian Lewis is kind of a sneaky good player on this offensive line. He outperformed both of the rookie tackles. Cross has a lot of work to do in run blocking still, but that was kind of expected coming out of college. Yeah. And Lucas was pretty solid all around, but I don't think they're poised for massive breakout. I think they'll both be solid players in the NFL. I think Lewis has a higher chance of breaking out than the other two because he is going into his contract year. And he's been a steady grader so far. He could break out. Phil Haynes is definitely the guy they need to improve on the most because he had a pretty low grade overall. And I think Evan Brown could end up losing this job by the end of the year. Olu Oluwatimi from Michigan. I loved him coming out of the draft. I think they got an absolute steal out of him. And they get him in the 3rd, I think. He's got a lot of potential, and he's a great player. And then they also got Anthony Bradford in, I think, around the same time as Olu. And he can play on the interior. He can take over for Haynes if needed to. If it's that bad for him, I like his opportunity. I like his chances as a young player. See if he can just fill in and be a little more than, it's going to sound mean, but a liability like Haynes. Haynes is clearly the weak link at this point, I think. And if they can get anything out of Bradford in training camps or preseason, they should push him into the starting job, try to just get him developing and hope their draft pick hits again. Because last year, pretty much every pick hit for them. They clearly have something going on pretty well here with Dan Schneider and Pete Carroll. I think they're starting to figure things out in the draft.
John Schneider.
Wrong one. My bad.
Close. I mean, I get it.
Enough Schneiders.
Yeah. So I'm looking at this in 21, and like, if I were making these rankings, and I don't know what I did, I very well have had this switched, and if I did, I hate myself. But definitely would put the Giants' offensive line in front of Seattle's. The Giants are at 24 for those that are listening on audio. Those that are listening on audio, though, should go check it out on Instagram and like it and stuff.
Do you know how much difference you had in their rankings? I'm looking at it right now.
No, stop.
17 versus 24th.
No way.
Giants were 24th, 17th for the Seahawks.
I'm a bad guy.
Jeez. We ranked them at the same spot, and I had the Giants only like 3 away.
Kane had them at 16. Tyler had them at 26. That's what dragged it down.
I do feel like the Giants have more like glaring liabilities. They have the centerpiece left tackle, but yeah, I don't think anybody's glaringly horrible.
The thing is, I like Evan Neal a lot, so that's another reason why. I don't know why.
That's why I said like
this. Yeah, my mistake. I'm not good at this, so that would explain why. All right, moving on to this front seven. I said there were 2 problem spots outside of quarterback, and then there were 2 really bright spots. We already went over one of the problem spots in the offensive line. This is probably going to be the other one here in the front seven. They have been a team that has, obviously over these last 2 drafts, like we praised their last draft in 2023, we praised their 2022 draft. In those drafts, other than the Boye Mafe pick in 2022, they have not really invested in the front seven, really. And that's been kind of a problem here recently. Like, they bring in Bobby Wagner. I really think that, like, everybody saying that he's not good anymore is kind of like he was first in PFF grade among tackles last year. He's still going to be a dominant run defender. It's just a matter of can he run and chase? But I also think that, like, you know, being in the NFL and being a Hall of Fame linebacker, he's got the knowledge to, like, make some mental decisions that can make up for his lack of physical quickness. Like at this point in his career, like a guy like just on this team, no hate for this fella, but Jordan Brooks, like he doesn't have the mental quickness, but he can make up for that with his speed and actual quickness. Bobby Wagner just sees the play already and he's already there. I definitely don't think he's the best linebacker in the NFL anymore. But I definitely think like there's a world where he is, like he still could be a top 5, top 8 linebacker in the NFL for Seattle, and they desperately need that here. On each edge, you have Darrell Taylor and Uchenna Nwosu. You're just not super excited about either one of those guys.
Not good run defenders.
Yeah, I was about to say Darrell Taylor is your definition of a pass rush specialist. He is giving you absolutely nothing in run defense. One of the worst run defenders in the NFL. Same thing with Uchenna Nwosu. They're, just pass rushers. And we talked about it a little bit before the show. They do bring in BT Jordan here. That's been like one of the quieter raves among, all the people that love talking about the assistant coaching pickups. They're all talking about BT Jordan going to Seattle. This is like the Duke Manyweather, for any of you who knows who that is. He's a big like offensive line guru, does his like own thing now. I can't remember what team he was last with, but he's
done a lot of work with the Chargers.
Yeah. Like
every tackle we have.
Yeah, and like he's like the offensive line whisperer, but he doesn't like actually work for anybody. That's what BT Jordan was for Michigan State last year, but he was off doing his own thing. Like during the summer, he had like a lot of the top edges in the NFL, like working with him, kind of like the edge rush whisperer, the pass rush whisperer. And Seattle, I'd imagine they don't really release contract info for assistant coaches, but I'm going to go on a limb here and say that they gave him a bag, because not only is he, making the jump to the NFL, but there were a bunch of millionaires that were paying him to work with him, and now they're working exclusively for Seattle. And yes, they absolutely need it, because the names on this defensive front are not very high, and they're just going to hope that they get coached up here. The best player here, at least on the front end, is probably Draymond Jones, who they bring in here. They get him very early in free agency, and had they have tried to sign him probably 2 or 3 days later, the price would have gone up by like $4 or $5 million a year, because the interior defensive line market exploded all of a sudden, and now he's going to be really a nice value, especially if he can be the guy that he was in Denver, but also not giving you a whole lot in the run defense department. He's going to be that pass rush specialist, and that's why you're really hoping that these linebackers in Jordan Brooks and Bobby Wagner can pick up that slack that these guys are going to leave here. It's just a really unbalanced group, and you just really hope that Bobby Wagner can make up for the lapses in run defense, and you just hope that these guys who aren't like premier pass rushers by any stretch, but are pass rushing specialists, can play like premier pass rushers.
Yeah, this group, they're solid pass rushers. I'll give them that. Everybody can pass rush. But last year, they were ranked 30th in rushing yards per game. 30th. The only teams that were worse than them were Houston and Chicago, the 2 worst teams in the NFL that were always behind them.
Chargers didn't make that list?
Nope. They gave up 5 less yards per game, and the Lions gave up 4 less yards per game. They were 30th out of 32. And they made one move that actually made them better. Granted, it was Bobby Wagner who had a 91.1 run defense grade, but Bobby Wagner can't do it on his own. Hopefully he can play, call, and adjust on the field, but their other pickups on the D-line and Jaron Reed, he didn't even get to 60 in run defense.
Now.
Yeah, he's just covering a hole. And Draymond Jones, like you mentioned, his run defense grade was horrible. He had 41.8. They are going to be weak on that front line. The linebackers should be fine. Brooks is explosive enough, and with Wagner's savviness and play recognition, he can probably guide them in the right direction. So maybe they don't give up massive runs, but it's not going to help that they're going to be getting about 4 yards every time unless Bobby Wagner's accurately predicting which hole they're going to go through. Because as great as he is, he can't carry the other 6 guys on his back.
Yeah, run defense is not a one man can fix this problem. Like, you can do that with pass rushers conveniently enough, which is kind of weird that they haven't done that. Like you can fix your pass rush with one like super big signing or come close to it.
Uchenna and Taylor both had about 10 sacks.
Yeah,
they were pretty solid.
Which one of them it was Daryl Taylor. Daryl Taylor had 27 pressures last year and
And
converted 10 of them into sacks. Like,
Uchenna was steady, and then he was all or
you
nothing.
gotta imagine that, because I was about to write that in for Uchenna Nwosu, but it was actually Daryl Taylor here that did that. But you gotta imagine that takes a step back. Like, he's really gonna have to pick up his pressure numbers if he wants this pass rush to stay as productive as it was. I mean, when you see we got 10 sacks from each of our edge rushers, that's really good. But then when you look, a little bit deeper, you see the pressure numbers, and one of those guys is really carrying in the pressure department, and twice as many pressures as Daryl Taylor, despite the same amount of sacks. So they
have some youth coming in, like Derek Hall. He can be a little better.
Yeah.
And then Boye Mafe is not a run defender. He's the same mold as the other. Same mold as the other two.
I wouldn't say it was a waste of a second round pick quite yet. I don't know if he's going to pan out. I kind of thought of him as more of a third, fourth round guy with some athletic tools.
He's a pure gadget pass rusher. You want him as a specialist, and that's it.
I feel like, maybe, I talked about BT Jordan. Maybe he fixes that, and maybe he can get Boye Mafe going. And if he can get Boye Mafe and Derek Hall going, you've got 4, let's just call them average pass rushers. That's a lot more than a lot of teams have. Like, that's a legit asset, especially when you've got the rest of, that offense is explosive as it is. And this secondary transition moment, that is very good. We have this group at 3rd, which is very high. And I'm going to just say it. If you think that's too high, you might be right. But I think, and I had them very high as well, and I'm pretty sure you did as well, if I'm not mistaken here. This wasn't like a one person carries the whole.
I can rip it off real quick for you guys.
You and me.
We both had them at 2.
Mm-hmm. Tyler had them at 4. Kane had them at 6th. We're both very high on the Seattle secondary, and I think that's because we are both high on Devon Witherspoon. We both really liked what we saw from him in Illinois. Like, I heard somebody say, like, he plays like he got the play call said into his ear before the play started. And he can blow up plays. Even in run defense, he can go in and blow up plays. He's a phenomenal cover player. I'm not saying that he's going to be Sauce Gardner in year 1, but he could have a phenomenal rookie season for a corner. Like, we could go on a run like how we did with tackles for 2 years, where we get an all-pro as a rookie in back-to-back classes from the same position with Wirfs and Slater. We could get that with Gardner and Witherspoon. You also have Tariq Woolen here, who had a phenomenal rookie season in his own right, was pushing Sauce Gardner for defensive rookie of the year. Whether that was rightful or not, we will not talk about. But it happened. You also, in the slot, you also have Michael Jackson here. Don't get it confused. It's not that Michael Jackson. It's not that Michael Jackson. Who's going to be playing the perimeter corner here. And, depending on whose depth chart you look at, I'm pretty sure Seattle probably put out their official one for training camp. I know a lot of teams around the league did that 1 or 2 days ago, and we put this together before that. Did you see it? Did you happen to see it or no?
I can look it up really quick, but I'd imagine he takes over the spot for Michael Jackson.
Yeah, so there's a world where Devon Witherspoon plays outside on the perimeter, and Kobe Bryant, who played in the slot for them last year, who also not that Kobe
Pretty
Bryant.
solid.
Don't get it confused there.
What's with them in famous names? Are they just mistaking it when they go through?
It's just what they do. Also, fun fact: Tariq Woolen, no longer Tariq Woolen, kind of went under the radar. Reek Woolen.
I saw that. I kept looking at it. I was like, why is it cutting his name off whenever I look him up?
And I was like, I searched Tariq Woolen and nothing showed up. I was like, what? It's Tariq Woolen now. Kind of but I feel like the Shaq Leonard thing and the Odafe Owe, that was much more publicized. I heard nothing about the Tariq.
I didn't either. It's on their depth chart as Reek Woolen.
Tariq change he made there. But
oh god, they have Devin Bush as the starting linebacker. Well,
that's fucking go, dude. Steelers.
But Witherspoon's not listed as a starter on here. And Kobe Bryant is a strong safety. He's behind Michael Jackson. What the hell? I guess Jamal Adams technically on PUP still, recovering from his. I think it was tendon. But I think he can make a big impact. This is just a deep group in general.
Yeah, and which brings us to the safety room. Quandre Diggs got a big contract, I believe, after last season. Played very well. Kind of took a step back this year, but was still a very serviceable safety for them. And then you also have Jamal Adams here, who a lot of people forget is here. I put him as the big player on this graphic because I believe in how good he can be. Like, when he's playing at his highest, he was a guy that was worth 2 first. Well, he was a guy that was worth a first round pick.
First.
He got traded for 2, and that has not worked out for Seattle. And somehow they've been able to rebound and create this great roster again. So credit to John Snyder for that. But when Jamal Adams is playing and he's healthy, he is like truly one of the 2 or 3 best safeties in the NFL. Especially, he's one of the best,
front.
if not the best blitzing safety in the NFL. And it was not a bad, was a good coverage player. It's just once he got to Seattle, that kind of fell off, and he was no longer a good coverage player. We talked about, maybe Witherspoon moves outside to play the perimeter, and
Adams is slot,
plays slot. There's a world where Jamal Adams comes down and plays slot. There's also a world where Julian Love, who they brought in from the Giants, also comes down and plays slot. Very sneaky signing for them. He can play at slot corner or he can play at safety, while Jamal Adams is down playing slot corner. They have a lot of versatility with this secondary, and that is part of the reason why we're so high on them. I'll let you explain a little bit why you're so high on them.
I mean, in addition to everything we were worried about in the run game, you have, like we mentioned, Devon Witherspoon, who seems like he gets the play call every once in a while and just blows up a play in the backfield. And then you have a bruiser like Jamal Adams who can just run to the line and blow up a play. It makes me a little less worried about what the front seven's going to lack, even with Bobby Wagner, because you have a second line of defense that can kind of patch things up. And with that safety trio, you can move them anywhere and make it work, because Julian Love is probably the only reason why that Giants secondary did not fall apart last year. His flexibility to play anywhere on the field is just underrated. And I think he'll be a much better coverage guy than Jamal Adams. They're probably going to be more likely to leave him back at a true safety position rather than a slot. I think it's only a matter of time before Michael Jackson kind of falls out of the starting lineup, and Witherspoon and Kobe Bryant are more of your actual guys who are going to be on the field. But right now with our graphic, if it's just Michael Jackson is the weak spot probably, and he's not even that bad. We're just kind of crapping on him because we love the other guys so much more. There's not a weak spot here, and they have depth. If somebody goes down, they have another guy at the ready trying to get more playing time and probably earn a starting job next year. They can really just do so many things with how many people they have and make up for the lack of talent on the defensive line.
Yeah, and even guys that we didn't talk about as far as depth goes. I mean, we talked about Kobe Bryant, who's a little font here, but Trey Brown is a solid corner. If somebody goes down, he can fill in. I also think, Steelers legend Artie Burns, who had a couple good games in Chicago, could also step in and be a serviceable corner for you as well. Same thing as Michael Jackson if he doesn't end up getting the starting job, which it kind of feels like he isn't, especially with the youth movement going on in the secondary. I feel like it'll end up being Witherspoon, Woolen, and Kobe Bryant as your 3 starting corners with Bryant in the slot. I will say, and this is kind of a hot topic, I guess, especially in the secondary, is the Tariq Woolen thing.
Freak.
Sorry, excuse me. I'm going to give you, who is your, if you had to compare him to another player in the NFL, who is it? And I feel like this
you know who it's going to be.
It's a layup.
Yeah, it's Trevon Diggs.
Mm-hmm.
It's just boom or bust. He sells out for it, but it kind of works if they keep running the cover 3. He's not going to be as big of a liability.
Yeah, and that's kind of why I think they went out and got Witherspoon, was because it's the same reason why the Cowboys went out and got Stephon Gilmore, was because if you've got a guy, and I know Gilmore maybe not locking up a side of the field anymore, but he can, and the same way that I think Witherspoon can, if he can lock down one side of the field and you let Tariq Woolen just kind of play safety on the other side of the field while guarding a guy, and just let him make plays, that's where he's going to be best at. One of my greatest draft calls in the 2 years that I've done anything involved with
Was
the draft
calling him to the
was
Seahawks.
calling Tariq Woolen to the Seahawks.
Granted, it was 3 rounds
It
later
was
than
3
we ever
rounds
thought.
too early, but apparently it was still around late. Because if the Seahawks, if that draft was done again today, I definitely think Tariq Woolen's going in the first round, and I'd hope it to be to Seattle, so that way I can look good again. But I mean, I thought that was one of especially like picking the team too. Fantastic by me. Just gonna throw that out there. I do actually. I do this. All right, moving on. Unless you got anything else for the secondary?
Yeah, I think the Witherspoon comparison to Gilmore would be great for him. Like, just the same idea of Diggs versus him. Because Witherspoon gave up 1 catch in press man coverage last year. He can go one-on-one with anybody, and he's feisty. He's not going to give up an inch to you, and he's going to make you earn every catch. I think it'd just be a great tandem to have. Yeah, just two guys that are like puzzle pieces of what they do well, just mixing together and let one do one thing and one do the other.
Yeah, like we both said, we love Witherspoon. Like we think, why do my lights keep flickering?
I don't know.
I don't know. We both like love Witherspoon. Think he can be. I would not be surprised if he's a top 5 corner in the NFL within the next 2 years. Like he can be that good, and if they have that guy here with Tariq Woolen, that makes the secondary even better. Because you've got like a look. Yeah, damn it. We're gonna move on so that way I don't keep saying it. One of the coaching staff here in Seattle, which has been pretty much the head coach has been the same here for a little bit. 2010, 11, something like that, somewhere around there. So 13, 14 years, some number of years for Pete Carroll here in Seattle, and it was kind of like a Bill Belichick, Tom Brady thing after going into last season anyway, where it was like, well, who's the reason for the Seattle success? And there's like a third Legion of Boom party in that conversation as well. But it was like, was it Pete or was it Russell Wilson? And by God,
pretty resoundingly, it's Pete.
Swing one way. Pete Carroll takes Geno Smith career backup, goes to the playoffs. Russell Wilson has a good Denver team at 5 wins and awards a number 5 overall draft pick to Pete as a last parting gift. So that's fun. And it's our guy, Devon Witherspoon. But what mostly needs to be talked about here is Pete Carroll and the culture that he brings. I think at this point in his career is definitely much more of a culture guy than he is like a defensive guru or anything like that, which you probably is what was the conversation around him during those Legion of Boom eras when they were, one of the 2 or 3 best teams in the NFL for 5 or 6 years straight. Definitely more of a culture guy at this point. He is 72 years old, and that was a big conversation point last year. Is like, well, is he going to stick around for a rebuild? And it doesn't look like the Seahawks are rebuilding anytime soon. They took those Denver draft picks, made the most of them, and we could be talking about a Super Bowl team here in Seattle, definitely a playoff team for sure. But that culture of, look, if you play well in practice and you perform in training camp, you're going to play on Sunday. And if you play well on Sunday, you're going to keep playing on Sunday. And that was kind of the mentality that got Geno Smith this job and ultimately is what pushed Seattle into the playoffs.
Yeah, Pete's just a fun guy to be around, it seems like. Everybody's seen the video. Like, he was pretty much oogling over DK, obviously, when he's shirtless because he's built like a freaking Greek god. And then he comes in for a team meeting, like pre-draft process, and Pete just pulls his shirt off and just, hey, I feel like you now, pretty much. He's one of those guys that's going to get the most out of every player he brings in. He's just a player's coach. And I think it's kind of going underrated that the let Russ cook movement that he had, Russ felt like he was being held back. I think that ended up hurting them because if I'm not wrong, I feel like his passing stats went down when they were trying to force Russ into more pass-happy opportunities rather than the ground and pound, set up the play action, downfield shots. I mean, at this point, you can't even argue it because he managed to bring back a resurgence of Geno Smith. Russ was a great quarterback, and he had higher highs than Geno. He's a better quarterback at his highest moments, for sure. At his highest moments.
Here's a conversation. Is Russell Wilson a Hall of Famer?
I think he's going to kill it at this point. Like, if he looks anything like he did last year, he might fall out. He doesn't have any MVP votes. He's
got no MVP.
He's never had
no first.
I don't think
he's
had
4,000 MVP votes at all. Like no 5th.
I don't think any at all.
Jesus Christ.
I don't he's had 4,000 passing yards in a year either. Or if it was just barely above it.
God, is his legacy like equal to Joe Flacco's at this point?
It's not good. All right, let me look up his
Wow.
career high for passing yards. His career high for passing yards is less than what Geno had last year. He had 4,200
Hmm.
twice, and it was just less than what Geno had. Geno had an extra game, but he has 4,000 yard passing seasons, and the highest was 4,219.
Do you want to say like resounding no so I can put it on a quote graphic?
Resounding maybe. It's trending down.
It's
Because I
getting
was on
fucking
board
clicks,
for
Mitchell.
Russ
Jesus Christ.
until last year. I was on board. I thought he was well on his way because he's been nothing but consistent when he was in Seattle, steadily producing mid-20s passing touchdowns, upper 30s passing yards, and just never quite eclipsing into the elite range. And I thought the stats would stack up if he could keep healthy, but it's not looking good now. I
Yeah,
mean, he
I'm gonna.
struggled to have more passing touchdowns than bathrooms in his home last year, so not
Yeah,
looking good.
I'm gonna put that's not gonna get any fucking clicks, Mitchell, on a quote graphic and post it tonight. But another reason why Geno Smith was so successful last year and why that transition was, I guess, so smooth, is Shane Waldron, who did a phenomenal job as the offensive coordinator last year. He did the I'm going to fight with Russell Wilson about playing Russ ball or like running a real offense thing. And ultimately he won because Denver's over there playing Russ ball. And Shane Waldron produced a playoff team and a playoff offense and a, top 10 quarterback out of Geno Smith running that McVay scheme that has been made so famous around the league. I mean, I think that another year of this from Geno Smith puts Shane Waldron firmly in the head coaching conversations after this upcoming season.
He
Again,
should be there now. He got Russ
yeah,
to
I mean,
40 passing touchdowns. He should be there.
is there a world where Pete Carroll does a Bruce Arians and hands the keys to Shane Waldron and is like, okay, we've put this great thing together. I don't know if we'll be a Super Bowl team, but I can't, I'm 72 years old. I'm ready to walk away, but you deserve this type situation. Maybe we'll see. But if not here, then definitely somewhere else. Like I said, if Geno Smith, let's say we're talking next year about Geno Smith being a top 10 quarterback, I almost guarantee you Shane Waldron has a head coaching job somewhere. Maybe, I don't even know where. I don't know where. What's a good team that could potentially have a coach on the hot seat?
I mean, the Chargers, but I think they have their replacement
Bing, bing,
planned in
bing.
the
Yeah.
offensive coordinator.
Yeah, true.
And
Yeah.
then if that's the case, Ben Johnson's going to be the hot hire. Well, everybody's looking for an offensive guru, so
I mean that's
anything
that's what
that
you need
opens.
now.
Hopefully Mike McCarthy, because I don't know how long Jerry can cover for him. If they don't live up to their expectations, they got to kick him.
Yeah.
Like,
I
at
definitely think
least
that that's a real conversation, especially. But the one thing that I think will keep Mike McCarthy around is that he's kind of going to let
he's a
Jerry coach
pushover.
through him. Yeah, he's going to let Jerry coach through him, and that's not something that's going to happen with every other coach in the NFL. So, all right, done with the coaching conversation. Let's move on to the schedule. And it's not easy. In fact, you said it was easy, and I'm pretty sure I backspaced that because I was looking at the schedule and I was like, dude, what the fuck are you talking about? They get the AFC North, which is, that's 4 games that I can't imagine they're more than 2 or 3 point favorites in, if they're favorites at all. They get their own division, which, I guess the Rams and the Cardinals, those are 2. I'd say they win 3 out of 4 of those games, the 4 games that they have to play against them. But they do have to play San Francisco twice. And then they also get the NFC East, where you have to play Philly, you got to play Dallas, you got to play New York. Those are going to be rough games as well. They do finish second, so they're going to get Detroit and New Orleans? Carolina. Yep, because New Orleans isn't on the schedule. This is a pretty rough schedule. They got the over-under set at 8.5 wins, so that means winning season or not winning season. As good as Seattle was last year, they won 9 games. So you've got to say, if you're betting over, they have to be as good as they were last year. There's a world where that happens because they add a Devon Witherspoon, they add a Draymond Jones, they add a Jackson Smith and Jigba, and you just roster to roster, it's a better roster. But Geno Smith was a 10-year career backup. And there's a world where this was a flash in the pan, one season wonder, and the Seahawks take a step back even with this fantastic roster. I guess the question to you is, which one is it going to be?
I think they can manage. Also, I looked up the over-under win total, and it was the same as whatever the team before was. And I was like, oh, he definitely had the schedule in there right. And I looked at what was the Lions schedule, I guess. And I was like, that's cakewalk. No wonder. Yeah. And it hadn't been changed yet. I was like, oh, that's easy.
Because, like, sometimes you change it in there, so then I've, like, well, damn it, I can't remember what the last one was before that, and then I'll leave it for a little bit, and then I'll have to go double-check it. But
I think they can definitely go 4-0 in those first 4 games. I mean, the Lions without Jameson Williams, they can strap up, double-team Amon-Ra St. Brown, and then leave Bobby Wagner camped in the middle of the field for Jameer.
Yeah, with all those safeties, too.
They have the numbers for it. Giants... They should beat. They play the Rams twice. They play the Cardinals twice. Commanders they should be able to beat, and then Titans probably should be able to beat. Steelers will be a hard game, and then it's a lot of coin tosses. Like they could probably snag one from the Niners. Maybe I'm not too
I don't know.
big on that.
San Francisco's got their number. It's had their number for a few years now.
That depends on who's at quarterback. They're always changing that.
Also true.
Ravens, NFC or AFC North, they can if they go 2-2 in that, they're probably happy. But the first 4 weeks, they should go 4-0, and then they play the Cardinals twice. They head into
their bye week, but the problem with that is that
you get
that is the earliest bye week in the league in week 5, and that's your easiest stretch of 4 games that they're going to have all season. Like there's not a 4-game stretch that I can confidently I don't think they have a 4-game stretch for the rest of the year. Yeah, they don't have a 4-game stretch for the rest of the year where they aren't playing a top 5 team. From 6 to 9 they've got the Bengals, from 10 to 13 they've got the Niners, and from 14 to 18 they got the Eagles and the Niners. So
they could catch Burrow his first week back and catch the rust like you guys did the week 1 of last year.
We won that.
He's out of tempo with them and something's off. So they might get lucky with that if he takes his time on the recovery. Because I don't know. Jamar's obviously not a health expert, but he's saying wait 5 weeks into the season. If they wait 5 weeks into the season, their season's probably over. They are at best a wild card team. You can. I mean, you can put that last quote on there. If they wait 5 weeks for Joe Burrow to come back, they're at best a wild card team.
Maybe I might throw that on there. Maybe
AFC North's too hard, and they play the Ravens in there at one point. They can't afford to lose to the Ravens.
The thing is, remember last year? Didn't they start 2-3?
Yeah, but they had Burrow the whole time, so they were building rhythm, and they're starting fresh from week 6 if he waits this long. You're 5 games into the year. It's a little harder.
Well, I mean, they had their confidence shaken by the almighty Steelers in week 1. It's hard to come back from that.
Back to the Seahawks. I do like them, and I think there's a lot of coin toss games on here, but I think they have 6 guaranteed wins. And out of 11 games, you just need to win 3 more to get above 500 in coin tosses. And I think they can manage that.
And the thing is, I think this is a playoff team, and I don't think, hell, in the NFC, they could make the playoffs with 8 wins, but I probably going to go over here. I think they get the 9. I don't if it was 9.5, I'd probably pick the under.
I'd probably stay
just because I don't feel as good about 10. Yeah, because I talked about it with Geno, and that might be one of my biggest concerns on this team. He completed 51% of his big time throws. That's a crazy number. If you're a quarter Patrick Mahomes and those guys are completing 33%, 35%, and they're happy with that. And he completed 51%. It's not even
that
it's
play
a
action
pick.
game just opens up so much for them. Though. They scheme it well.
Yeah, and the running game's going to be very good. All right, I'm all in on over. So to wrap up here, head on over to the final rankings. We have their offense at 10th. We have their defense at 13th. So very close. Comes out to 11.5. We got them at 12 because we can't rank them 11.5. Championship window we have is cracked open. Now, you sometimes write in the championship window. You had it as open.
I didn't want to put it as, I didn't know what verbiage to use. I was like, it's kind of open.
Yeah, that was
they need a small miracle, but it's open.
Yeah,
they have
that was
an
executive decision to put, because I didn't want to put open either. Like I'd been doing closed. I'm pretty sure I've done closed or open, and I haven't. This is the first one where it's any kind of not closed. So we got cracked open here. Like especially in this NFC, I think if this team was in the AFC, I'd have to put like 1 year away because you don't know what you're going to get from Geno this year. Maybe they are looking for another quarterback. Who knows? Blah blah blah. But in this NFC, where they are, if you do the math here, they are our 4th ranked team in the NFC. If you're the 4th ranked team, I think you can definitely say, well, we have a shot at a Super Bowl appearance. And, that's why it's cracked open. I don't know if we'll have another team that's cracked open. But
Probably not.
That's like the best way that I can put analysis on the Seahawks for next year in their championship window.
If one of those 3 teams ahead of them suffers like a big injury, which can always happen, and they have just a hot streak at the right time, they could easily end up in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, in this division, you look at a team like San Francisco where the quarterback situation has been a carousel for the last few years, and what if the magic runs out and they just don't find Brock Purdy in the 7th round again? And
have you looked at their track record since their Super Bowl? They either make it to the NFC Championship, the Super Bowl, or they're like dead last in the division.
Yeah.
They are so flip-flop.
Yeah, and quite frankly, I don't think that they're going to be last in this division. That would be quite the task for them to do to get behind Arizona.
Injuries,
to get behind Arizona. I don't think it's going to happen. So 49ers to the NFC Championship confirmed, unfortunately for Seattle fans and Dallas or Philly fans. Offense at 10th. How do you feel about that? We got the playmakers at 4th. We got the quarterback at 15th. We have the offensive line at 21st. Averages out a little bit. I think that the fact that they have one of the biggest strengths really in the NFL in that playmaker group definitely boosts them up here. But what are your thoughts?
I think it's pretty accurate because they're definitely having to make up for everything else. It's kind of like the secondary group with the defense. They are pulling the weight of the group, and it kind of limits how low they can actually go, even with Geno as our fence rider of the year right in the middle of the pack. And I think the offensive line takes a few leaps. They could definitely end up closer to the top 5, not quite in there, I don't think. Just because Geno.
Line?
No, offense.
Oh.
Offense, not offensive line. Okay. No, they could be top half of the league. They're not going to make it there.
Prayers up.
But I think if they all go a little better, then they'll be close to top 5 total unit in the NFL for offense in general. But it's kind of Geno dependent, I think.
Yeah, and then defense at 13th, we're very high on the secondary, but I think we both voiced some fair concerns on the front 7 there. It's very, pass rush dependent. And
let me read the exact number of yards per game. 150.2 rushing yards per game given up.
Yep, Geno better complete them fucking passes because if they give up that many yards on the ground per game, especially in a division where you're going to have to play San Francisco twice, and they did it last year, and that's how they got shredded in the wild card round, is because they played San Francisco, who not only ran all over them but also set up Tariq Woolen with a bunch of stop routes that shredded him to death, and that's Trayvon Diggs in a nutshell. I don't know. I feel like 10th and 13th for the offensive defense is very fair. I think 12th for the team is very fair. This is a team that, again, mathematically, this is a playoff team. This is your number 5 seed. Well, technically, since we haven't released one of Philly or Dallas yet, it would be your 6th seed, which is just very unfortunate how the NFL does things, where we have the division winners of the NFC North at 14th and the technical
NFC
division
South
winners of the NFC South at 18th. But that's just kind of how it is. This isn't the NBA, where it's just 1 through 7 or 1 through 8. Yeah, Seattle is cool again.
Solid team.
Closing thoughts?
I think this could be a team that flashes a lot. They're going to be fun to watch no matter what. Obviously, keep an eye on them for fantasy because of that massive playmakers section that we brought up.
They've got 5 guys that are going to get drafted in a lot of leagues.
All 3 of the starting receivers, 2 of the running backs, Kenny Mack if you're in a deeper league and need it, and then Fan if you're
if you're nuts.
If you're begging for tight ends on a street corner.
Yeah. Wow, awkward. Okay. We're gonna close this one out here. Yeah, just be sure to do the like, subscribe thing. We've got 11 teams left. We are getting closer and closer to that number 1 spot. I'm very excited.
Please let us know if you think Russell Wilson is a Hall of Famer in the comments.
Oh, yes. Good one.
That's a big one.
Yes. Please
Hot button
comment
topic.
if you want to, say how poor he played. And, okay, Mitchell gave his official stance, which it was a resounding maybe because the Denver years.
I don't think he is at this point.
It's very weird because I don't think that what we saw from Russell Wilson last year is what we see from Russell Wilson for the rest of his career. Maybe not until like the last year, the last 2 years, which that could be coming next year, the way he's playing. Well, not with that contract, but I'm also resounding maybe because I remember Russell Wilson as year in and year out was a top 5 quarterback, and there's very few guys that were like that for an 8 to 10 year stretch. Like that's saying something. Not a lot of guys can do that on a year to year basis. But the MVP votes thing, that Super Bowl that he won was not exactly like a Patrick Mahomes Super Bowl where it was like, he brought them here. He won the game. It wasn't close. You're absolutely correct. And maybe he's got 2 if old Petey hands the ball off there. So that's another thing that you got to be putting into consideration, but he doesn't have the hardware for it. So
his former teammates seem to be spoken out about him. The Super Bowl Legion of Boom. I think a lot of things are coming out of the closet about him, about how maybe they were covering up for him a lot.
Oh, Lord, dude.
It's just Pete.
With Richard Sherman going on talk shows now and like being on
he's going to be on Undisputed
TV every day, and Denver, if they're anything like they were last year, are going to be one of the first 2 or 3 things that gets brought up as a headline, and Richard Sherman's going to air every bit of dirty laundry that possibly happened in that Seattle locker room on a week-to-week basis. That just want to cover that. Richard Sherman and Skip Bayless, as much as like Undisputed and First Take, and that is kind of falling out of favor with a lot of people, rightfully so. That's going to be fun, at least for like the first couple episodes. That's going to be super fun.
Especially after his ran on him in like 2012 or whatever.
That's more so. Like obviously, Richard Sherman is a very intellectual being. He has a lot of football knowledge. He's been great on TV for Amazon Prime. I really like. I think the Prime TV crew was really good. Especially for it to be year 1, I think they did really well.
If it wasn't on Amazon Prime, I'd say it's must-watch TV, but it's on Amazon Prime, and only so many people are going to go on there.
It's much-watch streaming. I definitely we're definitely not going to head into this conversation. People have already clicked off. All right. Like, comment, subscribe. Tell us about Russell Wilson's Hall of Fame case. Tell us what you think about the Seattle Seahawks in 2023, and we will be back very shortly with the number 11 team in our power rankings. So with that, for Mitchell McDonald and myself, Jaden Kozak, we are out of here. Peace.